Hi guys, I'm ExactChaos and welcome to a brand new episode of Transport Planner Says. I have decided to change the format of the old series a little bit and focus it and not actually try and build a city while I do these things, but rather focus on the little elements of transport and the transport system and transport planning as we go along. And the one thing that I'm just going to use one of the current cities that I'm playing and one in my existing series. And I'm going to talk about the topic of synchronized, or actually it's called coordinated traffic lights, also referred to incorrectly as synchronized traffic lights. But basically we're timing, and we're going to use the traffic precedent mod to time traffic lights to work more efficiently. So let me start by just going somewhere where I can explain a few things to you. And let's get out of this and let me show you what we mean by some of the reasoning behind it. So I'm gonna grab this 4x1 type road, and I'm just gonna do a section like this, and a section like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flip these around to make sense. Okay, so standard signal, right, where you've got all the movements and you've got some storage lanes over here, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about why we synchronize and why not. If I just quickly want to look at the lane disciplines that we're looking at over here, what I would typically see is something like that. Okay, if we do the same thing over here, we'll do something like that. We'll do the same thing on this side. Okay, and this is the view that we typically get of intersections. And bear in mind, intersections come in all shapes, sizes and forms, but this is the very standard way where you use a storage lane for the left turn or the opposing turn. If you're in a left side drive, then it's the right turn. So the vehicles that's making the turn to oppose the oncoming traffic, they typically have their own lane. It's more efficient to do it that way. So that's basically what this setup is about. So why do you do coordinated traffic lights or timed traffic lights? Well, in the first instance, a single intersection like this would not be a coordinated junction or a coordinated signal. It's just a timed signal that uses where you try and balance the flows as best as possible. So, okay, talking about that, so let's go into, well, let's use the mod, have a look at it, and so let's set up the time traffic light. So in the very basic, let's add the step. So in the very basic form, you get this movement and that movement, so two phases, this movement and that movement, and that is very typical of places where you've got equal flows on both these links. So it's a flow in this direction, let's say north-south, and the flow east-west over there, which is very similar in nature, and so it's just a two-phase signal. So one phase looks like this, the other phase looks like that. Okay, that's a two-phase signal, very simple and straightforward. So the problem with that is that now there's a left turning movement that is opposing this through movement, and that's very typical. You see that in most places, parts of the world, you do see that. There are places like where I live in Dubai where that's not allowed at all for these vehicles, these left turners, to filter through the oncoming traffic. To filter through the oncoming traffic. So in those cases, and when these volumes become high and it causes a lot of problems with efficiency, so effectively they back up, blocking the through movement while these turners are waiting for a gap over here. Then we start looking at arrangements where we give these guys a phase so that it's not as unsafe or as inefficient. And there are two ways of doing that. In Dubai, they do that by effectively allocating a phase to the movement. So it would turn red on all of the other signals and this one will be green by itself. So that then allows this movement some time to get all of the movements, including the through, the left, the right turn, all of the movements gets done. In other parts of the world, like Australia and South Africa and the UK and I think like so on, what they do is instead of doing that, they do this arrangement where the through movements occur at the same time. Oops, and the turns occur on the same time. So if we turn it like that, this movement over there and that movement over there. And if you're using this mod, it is pretty useful to move around to the direction or the approach that you're trying to work with, so that you don't get confused with what that signal is doing, because that's now saying the wrong thing. But if we turn it around over here, we can see it is actually in this case the left turn. So there we go. So that's then what it would do is it will have one phase like this, effectively, where your left turners go together. And bearing in mind, this is only if those left turners are fairly well balanced. So we've got approximately the same amount of vehicles wanting to turn left there, and the same amount of vehicles wanting to turn left over here. Okay, so then the next phase in this arrangement would be the closing of the left turn, and now the through movement goes. So now these guys go straight through unopposed by the left turners. In the previous phase with the left turners, they were going through, doing the left turn, not through, doing the left turn, not being opposed by the through movements, and now the through movements are doing their thing, not being opposed by the left turners. So in this kind of arrangement, so let's quickly do a setup. So let's say we'll add that step, we'll add another step which is the left turners. Okay, we'll add that step, then we'll add another step in which we switch these off and we turn these on. So now this is a three-phase signal, but now again these left turners have to filter through there. So you would only do that if that then does not impede, is not a problem for the efficiency. If it is, then what you do is again you would add this phase. Oops, sorry, that one. Okay, save it, and add another step where we do that. Okay, so now you can see there's a four-phase signal, and if we go through them, we go through movements, left turn, okay, through movements on the east-west, left turns on the east-west, left turns on the north-south, and through movements on the north-south. So that's a four-phase signal. Alternatively, if you're doing four phases, you can do the way they do it in Dubai, which is just every approach gets its own dedicated phase. So let me do that. Let me show you what that means. So that is one, then this is one, then this is one, and then that is one. So those, oops, which one did I do? I'm not sure. Let's have a quick look. So it's so it's east, west, north, and south. Okay, so each one gets, and that gives you a little bit of flexibility in terms of how you balance out the various signals. Okay, so that's basically how you do. And so you have to gauge when you're getting a big movement from one direction, you probably want to go with one of these setups. If you're getting particularly high left turn volumes, then you might separate the left turns out, those kind of things. Okay, and this game is, and then of course in reality you also get the flexibility of doing the right turns, and the right turns with opposing left turns and things like that. So if you're effectively doing this left turn and this left turn, you could also do this right turn and that right turn at the same time if you've got a heavy right turn movement. The problem does, however, come in if you're actually sharing that lane with the through movement, then it gets blocked at some point. Okay, and I think that's part of the reason why this setup is favored in Dubai, because it's fairly simple. straightforward, and if the approach gets blocked up by certain movements, you just let all of them go through at the same time. So that's the basic setup of a timed traffic light. Now, the reason you would actually use timed traffic lights a little bit more, so let's get out of this. I'm not going to start it or anything like that. Let's remove the timed traffic light and we get out of that. So now, where is synchronized or coordinated, not synchronized, coordinated traffic lights very useful? Where you have movements like this, where look at that mess. So where you've got signals close together and you've particularly got a heavy movement in one direction as opposed to the other. So here you can see it's very sticky. These things are starting and stopping, getting stuck in the middle. It's not a massive tailback or anything like that, but it's a very inefficient way of operating this. So this area is extremely good for doing a coordinated set of traffic lights, meaning that we would basically have all of these green at the same time so that it's very efficient to get through this area, and then after that we'll have all of the cross movements happening. Okay, so let's quickly do a set of timed or coordinated signals for this. I think I have one set up over here which I've switched off. Yeah, so I've got one set up over here, and let me switch that on. We'll start that movement, and now let me show you what's actually happening over here. So now this section is running a through movement quite easily, and you can also give them the priority. So they just keep going and going and going. So you basically make the whole trip from the start to the end without ever having to stop in the middle. Okay, but obviously now you started late, so it's stopping. And now all the cross movements are doing their thing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all of this, and I'm actually going to set it up one by one so that you can see how that works. So let me stop that, and let me actually remove the timed traffic lights. So that's been removed. Now I want to set up these timed traffic lights now. So I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 junctions. I'm not going to go further than that, and I'm not going to go back this way. This has got a separate signal over here. Now let's set up timed traffic lights for them. So in the first instance, what I want to do is I want these to make their moves. Hang on. Oh, add steps. Okay, yes. Okay, let me go back. So once you've selected your junctions, the next step is to select add a step to the move to the signal timings. So I'm saying that I want green, this I want green, that I want green. So effectively the north-south movement that we're talking about over here is going to operate all at the same time. Okay, because these signals are very close together, they work very well if you do it that way. Okay, so that's the one. What we're going to do, because this is a heavy movement, I'm going to say, well, we want it to be a minimum time of 15 seconds and a maximum of 25. So this mod is absolutely great, because now what you also have here is after the minimum time has elapsed, switch to the next step of the cycle if the flow ratio is smaller than the wait time. Okay, so the flow ratio on this movement is lower than the waiting ratio on the side movements. Okay, the flow ratio is larger than 0, so that basically means this flow ratio is larger than 0, so you then start switching it, which doesn't make a lot of sense. The wait ratio is larger than 0, so effectively now you're saying if these guys are starting to wait, you need to switch over after the minimum, and then the flow ratio is equal to 0, so there's no more traffic wanting to make the way through here. Then it's just the wait ratio is equal to 0. Then that, I don't know. So in certain instances you might do that. Okay, so there we go, and we'll just go with the flow ratio is smaller than the wait ratio, and the sensitivity is not very sensitive, so the green phases are fairly long. And that's it. So that's the first step. Now the second step, if we do a two-phase system only, is oops, can't I move? Oh, that's actually it's sorting out button problems. Can I? Okay, hang on. Why can't I scroll? Oh, I can. There we go. Okay, so now the next is the other movement, the east-west movement. So let's change these up over here. We'll switch from the one to the other. And it's always good to make sure you're not having opposing movements to do it. So in this instance, our left turners will still be opposing the through traffic. So once that becomes a problem, we might have to look at something else as an option to sort that out. So now it's just the pure other phase. Okay, so now that one is in there. This one I want a little bit less because there's not a lot of as much traffic on there, but there's also not as many lanes. It's something to remember, right? So the capacity of this movement is probably about 3 times the capacity of this movement because it's 3 lanes, right? Simple. But anyway, there's not a lot of movement there. So over here, let's start with we don't want a 15. We'll just go that down to about a 10, and a maximum time of around 15 would be sufficient, I would imagine. And there we go. So now we'll start it. So now it starts, and you can see our through movement is running. We're still getting the opposing left turners, which in some instances may require some additional tweaking of the phasings to allow a better flow through there, but in general this flows fairly well. There's not a lot waiting over here, but then they all go together, filling up these little sections. Because the demands aren't that high, they don't actually fill them up, and then if it switches back over to the other movement, then you'll see all of these starting to run again. A very efficient through movement right over there. Okay, but as soon as we get a lot of the left turn, as soon as there's a lot of turning traffic, then a system like this starts to fall down because of inefficiencies over there. Okay, so that is basically the basics of setting up a coordinated signal system. And that means that something like this, if you just do a standard setup like this without actually coordinating these, becomes clogged very, very quickly with all the stuff that needs to move through there. Okay, so guys, that has been the first in this new series of Transport Planner Says. I would very much like to hear your opinion. Do you like this format where we just talk about one specific topic? And then, yeah, and if you have any questions in this regard, please leave them down below. As I've said in the past, this segment is going to be very heavily reliant on you asking some questions so that the content can keep going. So anyway, so I'll leave that be over there. And if you have questions, leave them down below. If you've liked it, leave a like. And if you want to see more of this, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it when I add the new ones. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.